about 3.5 days since the injury, and I'm feeling better and better. I'm back to sleeping normally, so every position is fine. It doesn't really give me any discomfort. Maybe sometimes I do get occasional annoyance in the piriformis more than on the right side, but this is something that I've been dealing with on and off for the last several months, and I haven't really yet figured out how to completely get rid of that. But I am glad that the acute injury seems to have passed by. The only remnants that I'm getting is what I also mentioned in probably the first video after it happened, that I noticed that the tenderness and the tightness seems to have moved over from a more from the exact localized region where the injury happened, so the lower right side of my back, down into the right side of the hip. So I feel that it's as if gravity has moved the inflammation downwards over time. And so what I am feeling now is a bit of tightness on the right side, external side of my hip, and even in the front. So as if the hip flexors, the fact that the hip flexors are able to contract and put a bit of a stretch on the opposite side of the hip is kind of showing some discomfort, some tightness, some instability. But when it comes to back movement, hip hinging, any of that stuff, everything is fine at the moment. So this is really good. And I'll still keep my guard up just because I do not really want to aggravate anything to any capacity. But if I can, in the meantime, train to the closest way possible to the way that I was doing before the injury without doing anything wrong, then I will take that. In here, what I was doing was some upper body work, and I was debating whether doing the pull-ups with extra weight, but I've done those the previous week, so I wanted to get in some chest supported rowing, so a bit of a variation that is I don't like to call it horizontal versus vertical pulls, but something that it's still challenging, but it's not exactly the same as pulling myself up. So I'm using the back muscles in a similar way, but it is different, and probably overall the fatigue is much higher when the weighted pull-ups are involved. So if I can try and manage fatigue on a day when I'm doing also Nordic curls, just a few days after I had an acute episode where I could have injured myself, then it's probably a good thing. What I was doing in between was some hip work. So if I'm able to also get the hip girdle nice and moving in a way that pumps some blood in there kind of on a daily basis, I'm usually doing that cycling to and from work. And so that is also taken part to an extent, but the more I can get blood pumping in the area and flushing away some of those inflammation compounds that are irritating the area, whilst at the same time promoting tissue repair, then it's a good thing. Then the bigger exercise of the session was the Nordic curls, and I was a bit on the lookout again for these, because whilst I'm staying in a relative locked hip flexion degree, which is to the minimum that I can master, I was aware that the stress on the body, on the total body while doing Nordic curls is substantial. So I was keeping an eye out, and one of the reasons why also I was doing 3 sets as opposed to the previous weeks where I was trying to push intensity a bit more. So doing a first set of 4, second set of 5, getting closer to failure, and then in this session here promoting some more volume accumulation, so doing 3 sets, staying at 4 reps per set, and getting some extra curls for the upper body in as the usual superset. Was able again to use both dumbbells and the cable machine, so I was getting a bit of a mix in terms of variation for the elbow work, which I feel is always a good thing. So if I can provide as much variation between all the exercises that I'm doing that are similar to each other, I think that it's giving me a good chance at kind of spreading the intensity and the volume around in a way that challenges slightly different degrees and ranges of motion, and hopefully I am targeting the area in many different ways, with the hope at least that during the weekly cycle no stones are left unturned, and it's going to help in terms of injury prevention and all that sort of stuff. Especially now that I'm hyper aware of that, and I really want to ensure that everything that I'm doing is, well, first done correctly and following proper form and safe sets and rep schemes, but also it's not too much, and I'm doing enough that is keeping me in the game for the long term, which is what this is all about. It's about fun first and foremost, but it's also about trying to stay as healthy and mobile as I can for as long as possible. And the fun component, I believe, is always a very important piece of the equation. Without that, it wouldn't be sustainable in the long term. But similarly, actually equally, on the flip side, making it as safe as possible is also something that ensures that I can keep doing what is fun without having to stop because of injuries that are preventing me from doing what I would like to do. And while I feel like I'm always training in a way that is risk and injury averse, at least in the last few years, where I got a bit more experienced, and I also managed to see firsthand what some small injuries can do in the long term in terms of degradation of fun and the way that they prevent stuff that you would like to do. I am now ever more aware that very careful, not programming, but a very careful approach can also be going hand to hand with the fun that comes from training. Don't know how much sense I made. It kind of made sense while I was saying that. Ciao.